This is a steering relay. No doubt the original one that came with my vehicle. It normally lives here, in this hole. And its only purpose is to convert the steering wheel input from this direction up here to this direction down here, which turns the wheels. This is a brand new, cheap, aftermarket steering relay. Britpart, I think. I purchased this a long time back, knowing that I would probably damage this one trying to get it out of the hole, which I did. A steering relay is of course $100 or so, a chassis about $8 grand. And if I was going to reuse my old chassis, it had to come out one way or another. And so there was some collateral damage. A chip here, a mushroomed shaft, and some hammer marks here and there, which is fine, right? Because I have this brand new one. But something began to eat at my soul. This is a genuine, original Land Rover part that I needlessly destroyed. This is cheap junk. Well, it's probably perfectly fine actually. But the point is, my Land Rover is like a spoilt child. It deserves only the best. So I decided the only rational thing to do was spend 3 times as much on a brand new, genuine Land Rover steering relay.
Lucky for me, there are still plenty of genuine steering relays out there. The usual places that carry new old stock parts all seem to have them. Uh-oh. I have a plan. Just hunt down every single new old stock part needed to build a steering relay from scratch.
Oh yeah. Before we get into all of this, let's quickly have a look at the old one. See what's going on. Now the trick here is that both of these contain one of these. And as you can probably guess by the size of the spring versus the size of the housing, that the contents are under an awful lot of pressure. So I'll have to be careful and make sure to follow the instructions. So 2 of these bolts, or at least 2 of these bolt holes, should be through holes, which is how you fill this thing with oil.
I've never pulled one of these apart before, and I misunderstood the instructions. All 4 of these screw holes are holes through into the oil chamber. The service manual is referring to filling the relay when it says to remove 2 screws. Presumably one to fill and one to let air out.
Not sure what size these are. I assume Whitworth, but possibly not. Surely not metric.
No.
3. What do you want to bet they're 2BA? Yes. 2BA. Great. Oh, that is tight. This one's a little easier. Let's look in here. Okay, let's see what comes out. I'm thinking I won't need a bigger container. Let's see. Oh yeah, all the oils. Okay, I guess it's empty.
In fact, after I fully disassembled the relay, this is the total amount of oil that dripped out of it. Hang on, I'll zoom in. Yep, there. 2 drips. Yeah, can't really blame the last guy for not filling this up when I am the last guy. 2 drips is plenty.
Okay, this is where things get a little hairy.
I'm going to remove this bottom cover.
And apparently the spring won't fly out and hit me in the face. I'd rather be using a socket for this to keep my fingers out of the way, but...
As you'll see later, I was needlessly concerned. Removing the top or bottom cap won't cause everything to explode outwards.
Just this one to go. Might be able to get a smaller size on. Yeah. Okay, 1/4 inch might fit perfect.
So long as you don't push the shaft too far out of the housing, you can remove the end caps without fear.
Okay. Oh, there's plenty of oily water in there. Okay, what's next? I think this is the part where the shaft explodes.
The instructions say, enclose the lower end of the relay assembly with a reliable sack, preferably a dull and uninteresting sack to suit your dull and reliably predictable life. Ooh, I have just the thing.
Okay, so here's what's supposed to happen. I'm going to hit this end of the shaft with a hammer, and the shaft should shoot out the other end into the reliable sack. I appreciate that there could be quite a bit said about. Never mind. Here we go. We've bottomed out. Now what do? A punch. All right, continue. Whoa! Okay, let's have a look. How did we do? Well, the shaft is half out. Oh, the shaft is still stuck, in fact. Hang on, let's engage our safety sack, just in case it pops out. Okay, what have we got here?
Well, everything on the inside looks fine. According to the service manual, the spring is technically under its minimum length.
Oh, lost a little length over the years.
But otherwise there is no wear on anything really, despite not having oil in it for who knows how many years. Now, since we have a cheap aftermarket relay sitting here on the bench as well, let's pull this one apart too and see how they compare. I don't want to wreck it or anything, but, you know, let's pull it apart for science.
The bolts are not the same size. Let's get the reliable sack set up. Okay, let's go. I'll use the leather side for this one. Whoa, that one had some kickback. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the differences.
There's this rumour throughout Land Rover forums that these aftermarket relay shafts are made out of cheese. Basically, don't even bother fixing your Land Rover if you need an aftermarket relay shaft, because it's just going to snap in half at the first sign of a cul-de-sac. So first of all, Britpart, Bearmark, all makes supply cheaply made aftermarket parts. I'm not here to convince you otherwise. However, people who post on forums are often full of shit. Look, I'm sorry, I'm not having a go at anyone here, it's just a fact. Forums and full of shit go together. I find it hard to believe that the rest of a Land Rover's flimsy steering components can supply enough force to tear a 1-inch steel shaft in half. But anyway, let's do a spark test. This is our control sample, a length of plain mild steel.
Keep an eye on the sparks.
Look at the end of each spark. You can see they all end pretty much in a nice straight line. There are a couple of firecrackers down here, but more or less long straight sparks. Next is a piece of medium or high tensile steel, 1040 grade I think. The 40 stands for 0.4% carbon content. The carbon is there to increase its tensile strength and hardness potential. You can see the difference, a much higher ratio of firecrackers. That's the little bits of carbon exploding. And this is the old genuine Land Rover steering relay shaft. It's already damaged, so I don't mind grinding into it a little bit. I'd say there are a few firecrackers. More than mild steel, but nothing crazy. And now the Britpart relay shaft. Now I am going to be a little gentle here because I do want to reuse this and put the relay back together. But you can see plenty of firecrackers. I'd say about the same as the genuine shaft. Now obviously a quick spark test isn't a conclusive strength test, but I think it shows that both the genuine shaft and aftermarket Britpart shaft are in the same ballpark. It's not like one was firecracker like crazy and the other was dead straight cheese metal. I'll also point out that these Series 3 relay shafts are a much stronger design than the older Series 1 and 2 relay shafts, which were drilled down the centre and then cross-drilled through the middle. So you know, if they weren't a problem, what are you doing snapping one of these in half? In saying all of that, this Britpart relay is far from perfect. First of all, the lip of this oil seal is folded over, so I guess the oil will just fall out. Let's put that down to a one-off whoopsie. But the dirt, this thing is filthy, both inside and outside. Scratches on the oil seal surface from grit, and you can see how gritty the splines are. Bearing in mind this is a brand new part, and it looks like it was assembled in a dirt bowl. Not that that's surprising, people don't want to pay for parts to be assembled in nice clean modern factories. But whatever, this isn't a Britpart review video. Let's get back to the reason we're here.
Alright, the last ever steering relay. And why do I say the last ever? Well, because of this piece. This is obviously the shaft for the steering relay. And when I ordered this, there was one left in the world. And here it is. This is a genuine new old stock piece, which I purchased from Cyprus, of all places. It would have been a spare part taken over by the Ministry of Defence. Now, I appreciate that these will probably show up from time to time on eBay when somebody cleans out an old service centre or whatever. But in terms of being able to buy one right now, there are no genuine ones left. You'll have to use an aftermarket one. Now these, the steering relay housings, are still available. Check out the date, 1956. This guy has been a spare part waiting on a shelf for 68 years. Well, now's your time, buddy. I don't think this is the original box. It has been repackaged at some point. But I do think this date matches the steering relay housing, and I'll mention why I think that a little bit later. Anyway, let's have a look. Greasy. As you can see, it is absolutely caked in protective wax. So let's get that off before going any further. It's the wrong part. Now, a Land Rover steering relay is pretty much the same from Series 1 right through Series 3. But the key words there are pretty much, because they're not actually the same. I ordered part number 543972, which is the correct relay housing for my Series 3 vehicle, and the part number stamped into my actual relay housing. And I didn't realize until now that Blanchards sent me 230757. This is a Series 2 relay housing, and they consider these two parts to be the same. So I thought I was ordering a new one of these, and I got one of these instead. See this cut out on my old one? This is how you drain the oil. It feeds into this bolt hole, so if you remove this bolt, the oil drains out the bottom. The Series 2 relays didn't have that. Okay, no big deal. I just won't be able to change the oil like every Series 2 owner. In fact, slight tangent if you're interested, the way these Series 2 relays were filled with oil is kind of goofy as well. This is a breather hole, and in a Series 2 and presumably Series 1 relay, the shafts were center drilled down to about this level, and so you would take this bolt out so air could escape, and then fill the relay through the center of the shaft. Kind of weird, but I guess it worked. On these newer Series 3 style relays, you just take one of these bolts out and put the oil in, which you can do on this one. So I'm not sure why they didn't think of the easy way before they invented the hard way. So this breather hole is a feature I don't need, but that's fine. It just needs plugging with a screw. Not a big deal. But have a look up in here. Look how thin this top section is. You can see underneath this lip there's a hollow section. This top lip is only about, I'd say, 3mm thick. On the Series 3 version, it's probably about 12mm thick. Lots of threads, not many threads. But sure, whatever. Just don't reef down on the screws and it'll be fine. But here's the problem. This is the end cap that sits on here. It also fits on here just fine. If you imagine the shaft is in here, obviously it's all the way down, but my table's in the way. The next piece to go on is this bronze spacer, and then the end cap. And these two sit down on here. And if you look closely, the depth of this is probably about 6mm. The depth of this edge is about 12, as I said earlier. So this bronze spacer is fully supported in the bore, and it's a pretty close fit. As you can see, I can't get it out. Moving over here to the Series 2 relay, it flops around in fresh air. There is no support for it whatsoever. Now, I don't know if that's a problem. I haven't seen all of the other components for a Series 2 relay, so I'm not sure how it goes together on the inside. But based on this cross-section I found online, it looks as though this spacer could be the same, and possibly is just free to move in that void. Of course, it's supported around the shaft, so it's not like it's going anywhere. But the question is, oh, it's stuck. It's stuck on the edge. The question is this intended to support the shaft radially, or is it just a spacer up and down? I have no idea. So that's a bit of a question mark. I'm sure after I release this video, somebody in the comments will be able to tell us. But the point is that this newer style Series 3 relay housing has a number of design improvements over this older style one. And this is the one that's original to my vehicle. So why would I downgrade to this one? Well, I wouldn't. I would order a nice new version of this, which is what I thought I'd done in the first place. So, what am I going to do? Well, I'm not going to use the Britpart one. Well, I might use the Britpart one, but if I do use the Britpart one, this whole video will be pointless. If you're watching this, I obviously decided not to use the Britpart one. Now, I could use this one, although that would be a bit of a downgrade from the original style one, and I would have to look into this top section a little more, but it will work. I can make that work. New versions of this one, which I would rather use, are still available. There's a couple for sale on eBay right now, so I could buy a new one of these instead. I don't know. I need a little time to think. Okay, I'm back. I'm not going to use this one. This is a perfect original Series 2 steering relay housing, and I'm just going to put it back in the box and save it until myself or somebody else can use it in the vehicle that it belongs in. So now I'm back at square one with a really crusty old steering relay housing. What I'm going to do before I go out and spend another 150 odd bucks replacing this, which I don't feel like doing because I feel like I've already spent that money once, I'm going to see how good I can get this one first. This exact one, which is pretty rough.
So, more wire brushing. I had already mostly cleaned it up by this point, but I want to get it as good as possible so I can accurately gauge the condition.
I don't know about this one, fellas. I mean, it's only cosmetic damage, but she's pretty rough. Anyway, let's keep going. I'll see about filling this missing chunk in before we make a decision. Come on. Okay, I think that'll do. There's quite a few little holes in it, but this is a rough casting, so I think that's okay. At least it's about the right shape again.
Now this edge has been smashed up by a hammer. Not sure how that happened. Must have been some heathen that broke into my workshop and hit it. Lots. I never thought I was going to reuse this, okay? And the over-persuasive removal method slightly compressed the screw hole, which explains why one of the screws was really difficult to get out.
Well, that's as good as I'm going to make it. I mean, it's still extremely rough, but let's give it a coat of paint anyway, and I will assess the situation after that.
I mean, it looks like it was dragged out of a shipwreck and then quickly painted. However, I am going to reuse it. It's not like you can see it in the vehicle, and there's nothing functionally wrong with it. If I went looking for a second-hand steering relay, I don't think I would choose this one to put in a vehicle. However, this is the original relay that came with this vehicle, so it gets bonus points for that.
Okay, almost time to put this back together. I still have to deal with these end caps. And by that I mean they need finishing. I'm going to zinc plate these. I'm not sure what the original finish was. I think they were probably just painted. But I have to deal with all of these little screws anyway. Now, I do have new screws, but as you might be able to see, they are not the same. Not even close. Well, in fact, they are the same thread. The thread on these is 1/4 inch BSF. And you'll note that they also have a straight shank on them, which you wouldn't normally see on a screw this length. And I assume that this newer one has the correct head size for 1/4 inch BSF. Let's check. So yes, this has the standard size head for 1/4 inch BSF. Anyway, this original screw clearly does not have the same size head on it. I forget what that was now. 2BA. Which may sound a bit crazy, but there's a reason for this. You see up here, there is plenty of room for a standard sized head. Whereas if we flip this over, the standard head is going to stick out over the edge, ever so slightly. But remember that this round here is supposed to be tightly retained in this. So obviously this won't be able to go over this if the edge of the bolts are hanging out. Which is why they made these special bolts with the incy-wincy head. Okay? Easy. Well, these turned out pretty well. Same with the washers. These two I messed up. I tried to do this late last night and I was in a rush. But that's okay. The original finish is black paint anyway, and they'll still benefit from the zinc that's on there. Plus, well, you'll see in a second. There's another looming issue that I knew was coming up, that I haven't really thought about until now, and it's got to do with this retainer plate. This is what bolts to the underside of the chassis and supports the steering relay. Now in my case, I don't really need this because if you recall, I built a tight-fitting bore into the bottom of the chassis. Now, where is the confusion around this? Well, this is part number 217694. It's a piece of pressed sheet metal. Now if you search for this online, you'll find sellers on eBay selling machined versions of these that correctly fit the aftermarket relays. So here's our aftermarket Britpart relay. And you can see that this is a loose fit, which is no good. And so that's why the guys on eBay are selling machined versions which will fit this smaller diameter. But here's the thing. I happen to have two genuine steering relay housings. It also doesn't fit either of these. And that's because all three of these are exactly the same size. So what is going on? Well, there is a difference, and it's not in the relay housings. It's the end caps. See, if I try and put this over there now, that's going to be a tight press fit. Whereas the end cap on the aftermarket relay is still loose. Okay, so that doesn't really change anything in practical terms. If you want to use one of these aftermarket relays complete, you're going to have to buy the machined retainer off eBay or wherever. Now that's nice information and all, but that's not my problem. I made the hole in my chassis a tight-fitting solid bore to fit this, and this is larger. You see, if I were to install this as an assembled unit, this larger end cap has to go through the tight bore, which is not going to work. So what am I going to do? Well, I have two options. I could install this disassembled and attach the end cap afterwards. Now that's not a bad idea and won't cause me any trouble. However, the next guy, which could be me in the future, is no doubt going to try and remove this by hitting it upwards, and it's not going to come out because this is too large. And they will completely destroy the relay in the process. That's kind of how we got to this point in the first place. So what I'm going to do is turn the diameter of this down to match this. That means that I won't be able to use this anymore because it'll be too loose, but I have a plan for that.
Anyway, let's start by getting this down to size. So that's the end cap dealt with. Next, I need to make a retaining plate to fit.
Spin this. Now see how this sticks out because it's fatter than the chassis think I'm going to hack that off. I don't really need this hanging out here.
All right, let's do this. I'm assembling this as per the manual, which says to put a 19mm spacer within the relay housing. And this is where things get interesting. I'm temporarily installing 2 of the screws, and they are there as a hook for the spring compressing tool. I made this up yesterday. It looks just the same as the official service tool in the manual,
Because this huge spring needs to somehow be compressed down to this level. Easier said than done, I suspect. All right. Oh, jeez. Oh, are you crazy? There is no way. Come on. Grow up here, let's get this done. Oh, I can't even get that close. Okay, I don't think there's any other option. Just got to man up and get this done.
I reckon compressing that spring requires more than 100 kgs of force, and I can't just He-Man it because I have to steer the spring without dislodging the washer.
Here! Oh, see, this is the problem. You can't just go crazy because it's a little bit of a precarious situation.
I'm sure people have done it this way before, but it was too much for me.
I have a game plan. It's not a very good one. Let me quickly explain what's going on here. So these fibre bushing pairs fit onto this taper, like so. And this massive spring has to fit in this gap here with 2 washers. Don't forget the washers. So with this in the steering relay housing like we had before in the vise, I was trying to by hand compress this spring down to about here where it could be locked in place and then this top bushing installed. Well, that's just, as we saw, not going to happen, at least not by me. This is a spring compressor. Obviously not for this spring. I'm going to see about using it anyway. Yes, this is my plan. Nobody guaranteed safety.
So I'm going to compress the spring and then hold it tight with cable ties. There's an awful lot of force in this spring, and I know that cable ties are infinitely strong when you want to break one, but in this case, I think I was pushing the limits. These are the largest ties I have, but bigger would have been better. And I had this stainless wire jammed through each end, just to stop the spring pinching the cable ties. I was a little worried that the cable ties were going to pop, But right now, so long as the spring compressor is in place, it's perfectly safe. Now I'm worried about my fingers.
My fingers. Come on.
Once I get the other bushings on, everything will be safe again. I need to take as much of the leftover springiness out of the end coils as possible.
Oh yeah, now somebody tighten up the hose clamp. You useless bug. 45.2 and our bore is 45.9. Well, mathematics tells me that it's going to fit.
I'm not sure how obvious this is for you guys watching, so let me quickly explain what's going on here. These two bushing pairs are tapered against the tapered sections of the shaft. So long as they can't expand in this direction, they can't move in this direction. That's why you can remove the end caps off the relays without everything exploding. What happened here was, I loosened the hose clamp slightly so I could drive the bushing through it, but that just meant that the shaft expanded the bushing outwards and locked everything up.
See, these aren't quite down far enough, so they're spreading out too much. So we'll try and just tap those down a little bit.
Anyway, there was a bit of faffing about trying to get the hose clamp just the right tightness to let the bushing slide through without it expanding. But no big deal.
Okay. You can see the bushing is fully within the housing now. Alright, what do we do now?
From here on, it's all pretty straightforward. The oil seals are pushed into each end cap, and the paper gaskets, which I grease first, and the bronze thrust washers. This end was a little tight, but it fits perfectly once it's exactly square. And for the top cap, I'm using the new larger headed bolts, or screws, and these are all through holes, so I used plenty of thread sealant. I don't think I mentioned why I didn't just use all of the original screws. It just happened that 4 of them were pretty much trash. Now, at the bottom of the relay, only one of the holes is a through hole. This is the oil drainage hole. I'm going to mark that.
I'll do it this way so you can watch. Ah, right in the forehead. Classic. I'm going to have to wash my hat now. It's covered in gear oil. Okay, let's make the same mistake twice.
I did my best to get the relay as full of oil as possible. I don't want it overflowing though, because I need relatively oil-free threads for the thread sealant to do its job.
Okay. And you go. And that's it. All done. Okay, this is the last time I'll have easy access in here, so I'm going to make sure I use plenty of cavity wax. So that machine surface you can see down in there, that's what our steering relay is going to slide into. And I want the junction between the machine surface and the steering relay to be absolutely drowning in cavity wax. so that any water that tips in here isn't going to find its way between the machine surface and the steering relay. There it is.
I am using high tensile bolts here. I'm not sure exactly what grade Land Rover used here, but they are supposed to be a higher tensile than normal. It's a bit hard to know because Land Rover specific bolts weren't necessarily marked with standard grading marks. But I think looking in the parts manual, the X and the BX prefix may have something to do with high tensile. If anyone has an official document that explains Leyland's prefix system, please email me a copy. Now I'm slathering the relay in this CRC spray-on wax stuff. I think it's called Soft Seal, a new version of Cosmoline basically. I machined a significant chamfer into the inside edge of this retaining bracket, because what I'm trying to achieve is a fillet of sticky wax between the edge of the relay and the bore in the chassis.
We are in. Good job. Let me clean up the mess.
This top arm is obviously unpainted. Don't worry, I'll get round to that. I'm just putting it on for now for demonstration purposes and to check everything works. Now there is a measurement of force that this arm is supposed to require to move the relay, but I can't find my spring balance, so we'll just assume it's perfect, because there's no way to adjust it anyway.
Okay.
And it feels pretty good. The bottom arm is going on for real, so I'm using plenty of anti-seize.
This is all the steering relay does. Nothing more. Oh yeah, scary. Oh, it's so light. Oh, okay. That is destroying my hands, but you can see that it works.
Well, there we are. That was a simple task that ended up being quite complicated. Thank you all very much for watching. I'll see you next time.